The Institute of Leadership and Management recognises great leadership as being multidimensional. We identify 5 dimensions: authenticity, vision, achievement, ownership and collaboration. We've broken down those 5 dimensions into 49 components, which enable us to organise our resources in such a way as to help individuals access the leadership development that is immediately relevant to them. This video introduces personal brand, part of the dimension of ownership.
Personal brand, the one we're going to be talking about today, is part of the dimension of ownership, because if you do own anything, of course, you own your own personal brand. So why is it important to leadership? Because you've got to really understand that your personal brand, your reputation is so linked to your credibility. And careers are long, and of course they're getting longer. We're getting much more connected to people. We crisscross over our careers, people we've met before, and people know so much more about us now because of LinkedIn, because of Twitter, because of Google. And therefore, we need to understand that we cannot, if we're operating in any sort of employment marketplace, incredibly difficult to not have a personal brand, and therefore you have to think about it very seriously. So I'm going to be looking at it from 3 perspectives: the idea of credibility and reputation that I've talked about, being on brand, which is something we hear about increasingly, and the whole idea of personal brand management. But first of all, if I say to you, what is brand? Everybody will sort of have an idea, and often we link it to trademarks or symbols. There's something that tells us that the golden arch is McDonald's or the red writing is Coca-Cola. But it's telling us so much more about the product or service, because it's telling us it's that hamburger restaurant chain, it's that cold carbonated drink. So we're learning a lot just from that visual representation. And if you look up the best known brands in the world, there are different ones, of course, for clothing, for online, for social media. Some of them have been around for a long, long time, and some are new and have sort of meteorically risen up the brand recognition tables. So brand is something that companies increasingly are paying attention to. And of course, there are brand agencies, and many of you will have worked with brand agencies. I certainly have done. And there's absolutely an art to it. We have lots of creative people there, but also a very scientific approach, driven by metrics, by psychology. What is this brand conveying? And because of the complexity of brand, we do need to plan it carefully. It is something that you build over time. You cannot instantly create a brand that, of course, everybody knows about or is indeed enduring. And we need it to be creative because we want it to be different, and we need it to link to our marketing plans, because we know a strong brand is one that customers identify with and are loyal to, because what it is saying something great about us. And at its heart, as it says here, Kotler and Keller, it's a great product or service. And that's what we're trying to achieve at a corporate level. And that's certainly the sort of thing we want to achieve at a personal level as well, because we want to be on brand, which means that there is a consistency here at a corporate level about what your physical manifestation of your business looks like, how you talk to people, the sorts of messages you've given them, and it fits with the reputation that you've built and the one that you want for yourself. So it's a lot of work, I think, that is the shorthand here. It won't happen organically or without effort or without due diligence. It's what it is you're trying to achieve. And I think the consistency is one of the most difficult things, but has to be worked at. Now, what's really, really interesting about this is Alistair's talking about setting up a big successful company, and right from the beginning, they decided what being on brand meant to them. And that meant being kind to employees. It meant working honorably and with integrity with suppliers, that everybody they dealt with spoke well of them. So that isn't just thinking, oh, we'll look after the customers and everything else will be all right, or as long as we're nice to staff, everything will be all right. They said everybody they deal with, they wanted them to speak well of them. And I think you cannot do any better than that as a guideline. It's that you have to be on brand, whoever you're dealing with. Seen a post recently on LinkedIn, and somebody was saying nobody used to want to contact them, and all of a sudden they got a promotion, and people who'd not accepted their invitations to LinkedIn before were suddenly issuing them, and the person was commenting on the irony of it, if you like. But we want to be the person who accepts the invitations all the time, because they fit in with how we view ourselves, not just when times are good or when we're trying to get something out of the relationship. So one way of deciding what your own personal brand is to construct a personal mission statement. Now, this is a great website. We've put the link there. But I thought, and they give different ways of constructing mission statements. And I've chosen this one because it's quite straightforward for today. So the first question is, you have to say, well, what do I value? What are the things that you think are important? And for this one, the answer that I've given here is education. Right, I value education. So we could all think, I value travel, or I value kindness. There's lots of things that are really important to us that we would know. And then we have to think, well, why? What's the big deal with education in this instance? And so the reason that's been given here, because it actually empowers people to change their lives. It makes a difference. It's a vehicle for transformation. Education is very powerful. So, as an individual, how am I going to live that value professionally? So, what can I do in my professional life in order to continue to value the thing that I value, and also to live why it matters? So in this one, the solution here that's being offered is to facilitate personal development. So I believe in education. I want people to change their lives, and I'm going to help by facilitating that. So let's go on to that, have a go at that, because if you haven't done that already, it really is a great insight into what you're about. So when you're thinking about your personal brand, of course, that's a great place to start, isn't it? Because if we're talking about a professional personal brand, which many of you are, we want to be showing ourselves as a valuable asset, if you like, on the job market. But we can't be a valuable asset to every job in every industry, in every sector, in every department, because obviously that's impossible. But we do have certain skill sets, capability, enthusiasms, which will fit with our values, to decide a single target. Where is it we ideally want to work, and what are we bringing to that market? It might be qualifications, it might be experience, it might be one of the things that you know that you value. If it is something like travel, or it is something like education, that you will have a track record of a commitment to that. So volunteering is particularly powerful, because you have values. You're saying you have values, but if you've been volunteering or contributing to a charity in some way for a number of years, that really does bring it to life and shows that you actually mean and have meant that for a number of times, because that's what contributes to making you unique. You can then start thinking how other people view you. Great, friends are brilliant for that. What do they think? What am I conveying? Because friends are kind, usually. A family are kind, again, usually. And they can give you the sort of feedback. Am I somebody who talks about education a lot? Am I somebody who thinks kindness is important? And ask them for examples of how you've done that. And then you can use that, as I say, you're building up a track record, you've got knowledge in an area, you've got experience, you've got qualifications. CPD is another great one of indicating that you're serious about what you say. You've been to conferences, you've done My Leadership, you've watched and made a learning log perhaps about videos, you've engaged with LinkedIn Learning. But what we have to do, as we'll talk about quite a lot, as I mentioned, is this idea of consistency, because you don't just come up with your brand when you're 22 and a half and then stick with that, for the next 40 or 50 years, because markets change. And I think one of the interesting things about identifying your transferable skills and what you're really good at is that they don't belong in a sector, they don't belong in an industry. They actually can be transferred from one place to the other. And it's only when you start looking at skills and capabilities transferable, you can see what's open to you. But today we're talking, particularly as many of us have been so much more recently than previously, talking about what our brand looks like online, your online reputation, and how you use social media to actually build that up. And we've all heard, haven't we, about people who've put inappropriate photos on Facebook or made inappropriate tweets, and then years later they've caught them out. We're so easily tracked down nowadays. It's so easy to find out stuff about yourself that's online, that you've put there, that you've forgotten about. So you do have to have a concerted effort to look at all the places that you have talked about yourself and actually make sure that you're proud of them, essentially, and that they're honest, that there's a reality about them, a realism. Because if we're putting fantastic photographs of made up places on Facebook that we're pretending that we've been on holiday, and that isn't showing on Twitter or it's not showing on Instagram, we're not authentic. So we have to be very clear about honesty. And it's always usually easier to tell the truth because you're not going to be caught out now. But do come up with a theme, something that you're particularly interested, that you like to comment on professionally, then you can become quite knowledgeable about it. Whereas if you try and comment on everything, every news item, every topical thing that comes into your feeds, you'll get distracted. Whereas if you become an authority on talking about one thing, and one of the ways of doing that is to actually form connections with other people. So it's not always about you. So you don't always start a post with I'm very happy, or today, the I, me, myself stuff. You celebrate the achievements of other people. You post, repost, you share things that other people are doing that you're interested in. Not only is that saying something about your generosity, but it's also making sure you're keeping up to date when you don't actually always have time to generate your own original content. Because of course, that in itself is hugely time consuming, but sharing somebody else's that you're interested in, making a positive comment. One of the rules I have for myself that I try very hard to stick to is if I don't agree with something, I don't comment. It's so much easier just to be somebody who comments positively, and then you know that you're being kind, because often people put things and you misunderstand them and you might make inappropriate or unfair comment actually. So just think very carefully about what you comment on and your commenting voice. Because if you get this right, people will hopefully be taking their similar advice, and they will be seeing you in a similar and a kindly light. So they'll be sharing the things about you, or you'll be hearing about opportunities from their networks, because people know who you are, and they'll think, oh, this person, you, would be interested in this, or I'd like to tell them about this. And as I say, if you are thoughtful and consistent about how you go about this, you will build up some credibility. If you will have a series of posts, for example, of things that you're interested in that will go back some while, and that shows that you're taking your career seriously, but that you're keeping up to date. As I've said, that's a really important thing that you're trying to convey to employers, that you are able to use that plethora of information out there. You're discerning in what you read, but you keeping up to date, and your interests have evolved as your career has evolved, because people do want to trust you. They want to understand and recognize your brand and authenticity. And interestingly, it's not one of the things we perhaps anticipated coming out of COVID-19, but with so much home working, we are getting so many more insights into the whole person, are we not? They're domestic arrangements, how much they liked or disliked commuting. We can have a glimpse into people's lives that before people could, even today with our connected digital world, you could keep yourself separate. So it is quite difficult, or more difficult if you like, to hide things from your colleagues. So that authenticity, so important. But this idea, as I've said, that you construct a brand and you stick with it, yeah, there's something to be said about consistency. But you might be finding you're not getting any success in a particular area, that you're job seeking or you're looking for a promotion. So something isn't really working for you. So go back and have a look. A great way of finding out anything really in terms of for your own aspiration is to look at people that you think are really successful and think, what is it that they're doing? Now, I actually did hear of a situation where somebody had actually copied somebody's entire LinkedIn profile and just slightly changed the names of the organizations. Absolutely wouldn't advocate that. But there is something to be said about looking at a LinkedIn profile, for example, that you think, oh, that's a great one. That's a bit like mine. I wish mine was a bit more like that. Similarly with CVs, there's so much great stuff to look at. And learning, imitating from other people is one of the ways we all learn. And it is not dishonest or inauthentic to look for great examples, to role models, and see what you can learn. And then going back to, if two or three people were going for a job, what would the other candidates look like compared to you? And are you actually really conveying what's so great about you? It's very difficult to, I think, for many people to big themselves up. And that's why actually getting somebody to talk to you about what they think your strengths are, it gives you the confidence perhaps to say more about them than you would left to your own devices. And keep thinking about what makes you that little bit different. Might be combinations of experiences. It might be the fact that you've got a chemistry degree, but actually now you're working in marketing. Whatever it is that makes you a bit different, a bit interesting, sets you apart from those other people that you're comparing yourself to. Because we want to be credible, and you, as I've said, you'll only be credible if your whole profile, there's a track record of somebody who has always cared about the outdoors, has always been a campaigner for, for inclusivity. You can't suddenly become that person, just as you suddenly can't say that you're a professional footballer or an actor. You have to have that really important track record, but it's concentrating on the transferable parts of the track record that I think really set you apart. You say, well, you innovate. Well, where have you innovated? You can innovate in all sorts of things, in all sorts of industries, in all sorts of office environments. It doesn't have to be sector specific, because we're not, most of us, social media influencers trying to get money from advertising on Instagram and YouTube. What we're trying to be is credible leaders and managers in organizational settings, and that is a brand that we take with us. As I said, we're very connected now. If somebody new joins an organization, you can be pretty sure that you'll have connections in common, and that it's quite easy just to send somebody an email saying, what's so and so like? And then you'll get your reputation given back to you, because it is absolutely coming with you. And I think being trusted, absolutely. The consistency, really, really important. Being kind, I think that's something that we're hearing about more and more at the moment. Honesty is something that you cannot get wrong. If you are honest and honourable, then that will be remembered about you. And if you're dishonest and dishonourable, that will be remembered an awful lot longer. And to be responsive to people who reach out to you when they're at different stages in your career, as that person on LinkedIn found, when they were on a downward trajectory, people weren't being kind, and all of a sudden their star was rising, and those same people had a very different view of them. Be that consistent person. So finally, for those people who are perhaps thinking, I don't want a personal brand and I'm not going to have one, I think if you Google yourself, you'll find you've probably got one. It's really whether you choose to engage with that and to make it work for you, or to just let it sort of fallow. Don't nurture it. It'll be there, but it won't be flourishing, and it won't be helping you as much as it could be.